Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 98. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented on the show, and subscribed. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment has been providing uncompromising quality for over 40 years. Samson products are long-lasting and made of the highest quality equipment on the market. Each project is built from the ground up with the ability to customize every need. The team at Samson focuses on developing the highest quality relationships with their customers, in addition to providing them unparalleled quality in every piece of equipment bearing the Samson name. Learn more about Samson's professional weight room solutions and the Samson standard at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Trusted since 2012, Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by the top level athletes worldwide. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Matthew Mitcheroney. Mitcheroney is the Associate Director of Olympic Sports for Strength and Conditioning at James Madison University, working directly with the baseball and softball programs. Mitch joined the staff in 2022 after serving as an assistant coach for 3 years at the United States Military Academy, working with the cadets, hockey, men's rugby, softball, and strength teams. Prior to joining West Point, he worked at American University for a year, as well as had stops at UMass and Saint Francis in graduate positions. Mitcheroney also served as a soldier in the United States Army Reserves from 2011 to 2018, while also completing internships at Harvard, Army West Point, Boston University, and the private sector. Mitcheroney stayed active as a horizontal construction soldier, and following his service, he has shifted his athletic focus more into competing in Olympic weightlifting. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Matthew Mitcheroney. What's going on, everybody? Today, I'm excited. I am joined by Coach Matt Mitch. What is going on today, man?
Oh, I'm good. Just like some teams getting in. Nothing crazy. I know I was late, so.
No, you're good. It's that time of the year. We know you're busy with everything going on, and like I said before we got going, we were on a pretty big tangent. So we're gonna start this thing off and make sure that we actually record something before both of us forget. So hey, without any further ado, let's kind of dive into how you got involved in the strength game, like kind of training you started doing leading into competing in strength sports and Olympic weightlifting.
All right. So I feel like my story is pretty similar to most, kind of like you back into it. Went to like Cardinal Spellman in Massachusetts, played football there, could have walked on, played D3 football at Bridgewater State University. I got into college in my first year, didn't do too hot. After that, I ended up getting in contact with an Army recruiter and they sold me on the Army Reserves, Be All You Can Be. It was a great experience. So I ended up joining. And from there, like, you sign a 6-year contract when you go in. And I thought, I was like, this is great. And then all of a sudden, between like kind of like in-state activations, like uh, opportunities when you're younger to make money, like go to these cool courses, it extended my college career a little bit. So I didn't get back in. I took about 2 years off of college till I was 21, which is always a funny story because I was the oldest freshman again. So like I'm sitting in these freshmen, like 100 level classes as a 21-year-old. But that was probably the best thing that happened to me because I wasn't the best student at times. But getting that opportunity to mature and then go back to college, realizing, it's a little easier than I thought. So from there, then I got competing into like lifting. I started as a motor development therapist major. So with that, like my end goal is to work with prosthetics and orthotics. It's just like a different variation of physical therapy where you're working with like amputees, people with disabilities, and you're doing like gait analysis. And it was a very interesting major, and I wanted everything to do with it. But then I found out, like, I had my friends were playing football. I thought about going back, but being 21, 22 at that time, when everyone else was younger, wasn't for me, especially as I started to push this career. I happened to just bump into the lady from RWL weightlifting. And like one day, like I was just down there doing hang cleans and it was probably atrocious, right? Like, because I've always loved lifting my whole life, whether it's bodybuilding or just competing. Like we said, that's how most of us get into it anyways, right? It was our hobby. And like she corrected me, coached me, and then like someone else made a point. They were like going to go intern somewhere else. And I was like, holy shit, like you can actually do this. Like that's a thing. Like you don't, because in my mind, I was like Division 3, like athlete, smaller school. I was like, you have to be a coach, probably coaches coach that. There's not like a specialty. I got a taste of it. Like I watched them lift one day. I watched the football team lift, and I was like, I was just all in. So from there, like interned at BU. It's kind of everyone's story, right? There, went from West Point, worked the summer with football at West Point, went to Harvard. At Harvard, I got offered a GA after I was there. So I went down to Saint Francis University. And now this whole time I'm kind of training like a young intern slash strength coach where every 8 weeks I'm doing something different. You know what I mean? Like you learn something, you're like, I need to do triphasic. You learn something else, you're like, well, squatting's bad. I can't squat. And then you bounced around, and I got kind of lucky where I got in contact with Sean Foster, and he set me straight. Like I trained the first day and he's like, we're not doing that. And then he used his like wisdom and got me into weightlifting, and that's been the wrap ever since, right? I kind of got the bug because when you train there at the old days in American University with him, like it's 8 racks. They're about 2 feet apart. You're there all day because like he's running a weight room very efficiently with. It was me, I think Phil Ruhr was there, and Sean, right? So Sean, as the director, had 6 teams. Like Phil had 6 teams. I was there as like a part-time, like restricted earnings position, stipend, getting paid. So I was like always there, right? Whether it was working with basketball, baseball, I just wanted to get involved as much as I could. So we all lifted together as a staff. So I got the Sean Foster coaching on my weightlifting. We can say shout out to him because if you ask him, he'll probably say it was atrocious. So from there, I started to compete. Didn't really know what I was doing, like writing my own programs. He was coaching me up. After there, I got offered a position at West Point. From at West Point, I worked with men's hockey and softball to start. Over time, I also gained men's rugby as a coach left. I filled down on them. I kind of gelled with the coach and the players, and they asked me to take over, which was great. I kind of fell backwards into that, right? The year I started to work with them, we actually happened to go to the national championship, so that was cool. And then from there, I competed in West Point. I got hooked up with the strength, like we say, like strength and conditioning. Like everyone who Sean put me in contact with my current coach, Jake Pudens, who's got me straight. Probably hates me a little bit, right? Meticulous, always trying to get like stronger. And working with a strength coach when you're trying to teach him for strength is probably not the funnest thing, right? But he deals with me pretty well, helps me. And you see all the videos I'll go through, like competing 3 to 4 meets a year just to stay fresh. From there, I got offered an opportunity down at James Madison University. I interviewed, and what we said is like, it turns out like whether you're in the military, as you know, I think you are too, right, Nick? Like military connection. Ike, the head coach here for baseball, went to VMI. So I came down here when he found out I was in the military, worked at West Point. We started talking about like what the cadets have to go through at academies, like my experience in the Army Reserves, his experience as a cadet, and then going on to be like a baseball coach there. Because I understood what the military was like as an enlisted person, but I also understood like what cadets and the people he was training there go through. And that ended up, I got a job offer for down here that I couldn't turn down. So now I work down here with strictly baseball and softball under Christian Carter.
Awesome, man. No, that's great. It's kind of very similar story to myself, and then I mean even to a lot of other coaches like Sans, probably the military avenue. I kind of did the difference, like you going in as like an older, like 21-year-old being a freshman, like I was that in boot camp, like as a 32-year-old. I was like, this is a goofy feeling, like to kind of be surrounded by all these people, but like you have so much more experience, like you can kind of help out those younger kids, or like when you're in class with them too, like you have a lot more experience. It's such a weird concept, like to go right from high school right to college. I feel like a lot of people would do with some time away to kind of be a little bit older, because you appreciate it a lot more too by the time you get back. And but that's for a different story and a different time. But no, that's great to hear. Like obviously, like a lot of that experience, like taken from the internships, obviously Coach Foster and kind of doing all that stuff, weightlifting wise, like working with Jake too. We've had him on, we've had Phil, and we've had all those guys on. Like that tree kind of keeps growing. So it's cool to get you on and talk a little bit more. So kind of go into how your role is now at JMU. Like you've got experience obviously working at a service academy, like having military experience and working with kind of a coach that was brought up in that way. How does that kind of trickle into what you guys do at a day-to-day basis, whether it be on the field or in the weight room where you kind of control those realms? Like, do any of those tie-ins from your experience or from the coach's experience, like make their way into what you guys program and how you run sessions and practice?
Yeah. So also I will add like one of our first, especially baseball, is one of our other associate coaches, Mike, went to VMI and got drafted out of VMI. So his whole college experience was military based. Then obviously went on to play pro ball. I guess the easiest thing, so I don't ramble, is the best thing about all that is efficiency, right? We always look where, we can always, and everyone goes back and forth, like we should do this first, that first. But then like you can walk up to Ike at any moment and I'm like, hey, like we're supposed to lift at 5, but they're done now. It's like, let's get them in right now. It's open. So we can we try to maximize our time. And like that doesn't go into like training philosophy, but whether it's practice where like Mike and Ike and them, they run a very efficient practice. Like just because there is 4 hours available for the day, if they're like, we can get what we need done in 2.5, let's do it then. And we can save on the back end. And same with lift. Like why do a lift that takes an hour, and like why do an hour and 15-minute lift if it only takes 45 minutes? Let's maximize the time, because we do understand at the same point, like they're student athletes, like they have a life outside of what we do, and they start to appreciate it too, where we don't like just the same way.
No, that's perfect. I mean, even if it's not like a specific like military thing, like that from your experience and from like the coach's experience too, like that's something that you appreciate, and being able to like jam pack as many things that happen into like a cadet's day, like it is a lot of work. There's a lot of logistics that gets involved, and you appreciate it a lot more when you do have that free time, even and not having to use 4 hours allocated to what you have. Like if you can condense it and like hit your big rocks and do the most important things within that time, you probably get players that are a lot more fresh, they're more appreciative, and like you maximize the quality of those practices and lifts because you're not just dragging them out for hours on end. So no, that's definitely a great point. What has there been any differences? Like we talked a little bit before we kind of got going, like it is super interesting. I like talking to people that have teams that are very similar minded, whether it be male and female teams that are similar sports, whether it be soccer, hockey, baseball and softball, like you have. How has that dynamic been back and forth? Because I've seen it at places where one might be prominent and kind of over demanding, and it becomes difficult for you to kind of manage both times. I know your softball team was a little bit different coming in versus your baseball team. How have you kind of blended and worked around the schedule so that you can kind of maximize working with both of those programs?
Yeah, so this year is completely different than last year. So I'll build off this year because we got together where with the staff, like how we train is a little different with like warm-ups, what we do for warm-ups, what we do in the weight room, how frequently we lift, like the time allocated to lift. But I think the biggest difference comes from it's really easy because like Lauren and Ike, both our offices are right next to each other. So sometimes if there's an issue or there's a conflict or she needs me to help her with testing, or like Mike wants me to go out and run like a warm up and sprint session, they generally communicate pretty efficiently. Like they have a good relationship. So we've never really run into. So like sometimes if say like, something comes up for softball where they have a compliance meeting that they have to be at 5:30, but they're supposed to lift at 5:30 and baseball is supposed to be at 4:30. They'll just flip and it's not really a huge. So I've never ran into like what we say in smaller schools or like some other times where you have multiple teams where they try to fight each other. They work very well together. The biggest thing is like, I would say the difference is, maybe I'm steering the question the wrong way, is what the team goal is, right? So when I sit down with the coaches, like training is all similar. Like we all do very similar things, but the outcome is different, right? Do we want to be like we said, is like with baseball, do we want to be the strongest, right? Are we trying to hit home runs or trying to be the fastest? Softball, like we know, like it can change a little bit because generally speaking, like softball, most of our softball players are 5'7" to 6 foot. Body weight, say like, I don't know, 180, 160 to 200, right? Average male on the team is about like probably 5'9", 5'10" to 6'2", right? 180 to 200, bigger field, bigger dimensions. So like, do we care more about it? Acceleration, max velocity? Are we going to train speed more? Do we want to be the team that can knock like 100 home runs a year? So like we'll meet down and talk and like what's the goal? And that's how we go back and program. So you'll see like a little difference with that. And that dictates how often we train. Where for baseball, we lift 3 days a week for 45 minutes all fall. And then we spent way more time sprinting and jumping earlier in the day, right? Dragging chains, pushing sleds, working a little more acceleration and max velocity qualities frequently, right? Because like if you do it more frequently, in theory, you should have more adaptation. For softball, with like sometimes they come in with a little bit of a lower training age as a women's sport. We hit like the foundational patterns first. We still sprint and jump, but we do it 3 days a week and more of a compact session where instead of going for 45 minutes, we go for an hour to an hour and 15, depending on the time. And we kind of stack and train the whole quality that way.
Nice. No, it's interesting too, like to take those two different approaches, but it's all based off like those conversations you're having with the coaches and what the overall outcome of it is. I think a lot of people that end up having both those sports really try to just, even if it's men's and women's basketball, whatever the sport is, like the equivalent on the other gender side, like you almost just mimic exactly what the other program's doing. And you're kind of just training two general qualities versus I like your approach where you're actually going in and having those conversations, be like, when it comes to like February on opening day, what do you want your team to do? Like, what do you want your team to be able to do? How do you want them to perform? And then when it's May and June, we're getting into conference play and like NCAA tournament, like how do you want your program to look? Like, what is the end goal for them at that point in time? So that's awesome to have those coaches that are like-minded with you, and then you're able to kind of facilitate it unique to what they want and their program.
Yeah, and that it always makes more work, but like that's the best part about it, right? Like, so one of the biggest ways I'll phrase the question is like, if you see us playing in a regional, what is like the defining quality from an on the field performance aspect that you think that is going to get us there? So I'll ask that, and it's like, are we going to be the team that like every time we're up to bat, like for softball, where it's everyone can go yard, right? Are we like hard outs, or are we the team that is going to pick you apart, like consistently steal? Are we the team that's going to be like sprinting in the outfield, diving? Like, is our like radius that we can cover greater than any other team, right? Are we like hard nosed, right? Because if you tell me like we're going to be a gritty team, that dictates like we might do more lifts with open sets in the moment, and we cue it the right way, right? Be like, hey, it's going to be hard. I need you to grind through this. And not that always it relates to sport aspect, but we're creating the same atmosphere they get when they practice and when they're with the coaches, and we're training like some of the same mental qualities, but also the same physical, right? Like, are we going to be a team that grinds it out? Or are we a skill-based team where like, are we going to be the fastest for 90 feet? Are we always going to be a threat on the base paths? And like, obviously you always want to be that, right? Like you always want to be applying pressure, but are we going to steal all the time? Are we going to like play small ball, hit and run? Or are we going to swing for the fences? Like, are we trying to drive the ball off the wall, right? Like, so, but that dictates what we do. And like, if you said like, we're going to be a home run hitting team, we're going to be power hitters, we're going to have hard contact, I'd probably go to you like, let's lift 4 days a week and we'll stack those qualities. But if we just want to be like leaner, faster, stronger, we want to be the fastest on a single or double, great steal times, great breaks, right? Like maybe we have to change what we do, right? Weight room is important, but it gets further away. And that plays into your previous question where that's where it differs from hockey, right? Where we know like hockey, the weight room plays a role, but it's not as more conditioning based sport. You have less role overall, like in relative strength plays in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, kind of touch on that too, because I know like hockey was your primary sport when you were at West Point too, and a lot of people have not worked with that sport or kind of really been able to peek behind the curtain of how that works. Like, what was your kind of general philosophy when it came to training, like your cadets, like hockey program, and then have any of those qualities kind of translated over as you like took over a baseball program for the first time?
Yeah. So the biggest difference with hockey at West Point is they're just like any other cadet student athlete, right? They all summer generally speaking, most of your student athletes at West Point are very like aerobically sound, aerobically fit, right? Because even if they compete in a sport, they still have to meet the new, I think it's ACFT requirement test. So they have to run 2 miles. And generally speaking, you will get most of your student athletes because they are tested and graded on that, will take care of that because that's something that can hold them back. If you don't pass, if you fail, you have to retake it. It kind of puts a burden on you. So they're more aerobically fit. So I spent a lot of time in the preseason when we'd get them before practice training, like anaerobic power, repeat sprint. And then like what's funny is, when they lift, we'd have to lift due to the time constraints at the West Point, where generally speaking, you can't get them before 2:30. And then they'd come up 2:30, practice from 3. So then I'd always get them after they skate. So they practice from 3 to 4:30, 3 to 5, just due to time. And so lifts were a little shorter. And when I got in there, I was a little bold, I think the first year, and I tried to push performance more and more. And as I got older, I spent more time with like functional range conditioning, time and attention, like isometrics, and they actually played better and performed better and jumped better. So I just like it's hard to think back to it because it seems so long ago because I've invested so much here. But like we had it's just everything's so different, right? Because here we lift before practice some days, and that changes what we do too. Uh, Honestly, I'm trying to blank on how we trained completely there because everything was pre-practice, post-practice, and at that West Point Academy, if you talk to anyone who worked there, it changes on the fly.
Right.
Something could come up like where 4 of your best players got held up taking a test. So then coach is like, hey, we're gonna lift first, which makes sense, right? Because when you're in season, like practice is one of the most important qualities, and you need your best players there. Meanwhile, it's easier to make up the lift. So like it always flip and flop, like we said, is like in the preseason, I'd take more of a prominent role. And then like you kind of hand over the keys until you take a backseat role. And that was the best thing I learned at West Point, especially when you work with a sport where like some of your best athletes aren't relatively strong, right? But they are powerful, right? They're in a highly skilled sport.
Yeah, I've had plenty of guys on that have been at service academies. I think you're my second from West Point too, so that have had some experience there. So I think now that more than ever, the audience is pretty well aware of. But it's still interesting to listen, like all the different intricacies and like the time constraints and how you kind of have to approach working with all these different service academies. That is very unique to the college realm, and you really have to think and you have to be adaptive. It's not like any other university you're going to really work at, and it makes it interesting too, for sure, but it definitely has some limitations that put you when those athletes are getting pulled in so many different directions. So it's cool to still hear how you guys approached it with hockey.
Yeah. I think one of the best parts I've learned sometimes is like, with West Point, it forces you to take the KISS principle. Like, like keep it simple, stupid. Because you got to fill buckets, and like all of us, like we're strength coaches is what we do, right? We want to like, we have the idea of like, we can run a multi-level program. Like, we have like A group, B group, C group. And as they get further in the system, we're training different things. But then you remember at West Point, like they're up at 5 a.m. after they go to class all day. They're not allowed to like take a car drive. So they're walking all day up and down stairs. Then after that, they're going to practice. And, like we can probably all agree, like running like a multi-level program coming in after a contact and conditioning based sport like practice is probably not the best thing. Sometimes like the simplicity is what they need in season. Where like we'd pull lifts, like we'd start 3 days a week and then reduce them to 2 as the season goes on and on. As practice went down, so did our lift volume. But our goal is like we just try to be the healthiest, right? Because I think like, any sport is a war of attrition. Whether you're in college baseball playing 56 games, I think hockey I can't remember off the top of my head, but generally the best team at the end is going to have the most available players that matter.
Yeah, definitely. Availability is key when you're talking about especially hockey or like professional sports too, when they're playing so many different games, or even soccer in like the college setting, like where everything is so condensed. There's constraints to every sport too, but playing multiple games back to back with contact, like hockey in college and professional is difficult. It's a different type of athlete for sure. Hey, so kind of touching a little bit on your military experience as well, like as it transitioned into coaching, like when you first kind of got into it and you decided to go back to school, like how was that process? Like interning and then managing like all your commitments like in the reserves as well. Like how were you able to do that back and forth? And then how did that kind of change as you got more and more towards like your graduate assistant position and then full time into the West Point role, or did it end right at that point?
Yeah, so I got pretty lucky, right? Where how it worked out is because I think after went back to school, graduated, like during my graduate assistantship and when I was working at American University, it was kind of tough, right? So where I was stationed was back in Massachusetts, obviously my home state. And like at the end of the day, like it kind of helps you like put things in perspective because you sign a contract, right? You said you'll do this. And whether they gave me like student loan forgiveness or monthly pay, like health insurance benefits, like there was an agreement we signed upon, right? And near the end, like it wasn't the best for me with my future goal, right? Like you can probably, I know you're in right now. Sometimes it gets hard, right? Managing both, especially with whether it's reserve or it's the National Guard, because you have other commitments that sometimes interfere with your main job, right? Because you are part time in that role. And it just like gave me a great perspective of from the time management, where sometimes like I'd have to coach Friday till 3 p.m. in Loretto. And at 4 o'clock, I'd get in the car. I'd drive all the way to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, about 10 hours away, go there Saturday, Sunday. I'd probably miss my morning sessions and drive back Monday for my afternoon sessions, 10 hours. But like it gave me a great perspective where like a lot of times like you can do it, you got to want to do it, right? And then same in Americans. Sometimes Sean will tell you like I have to leave early on Friday or miss a Friday, leave Thursday, fly out, fly back in Sunday, flights delayed Sunday at like till 11 p.m. Then at 11 p.m. I land DCA, drive back to my apartment, and I have track and field at 8 a.m. the next day. So like it is hard, and I think it's easy to say it's like hard to transition from wanting to do both, where it's like everything has a cost, and if you want to be, I believe, like you said, you're an officer. If you want to be great in the military, sometimes it comes at a cost of not being the best at your current job in the moment, right? Where like you have to pull from one to give to the other. You only have so much time. I did get a little lucky where like I did learn a lot from it, understanding like whether it's just like being around guys from not playing a sport in college, but being around the boys all the time, right? Like your group chats, group suffering, right, is a huge thing for bonding. And sometimes like understanding what athletes go through in essence, like sometimes you waste time like traveling on a bus somewhere, like doing things you don't want to do, but being together helped. It's a weird thing, but I always joke it's like military's group suffering at the end of the day, right? We all go through it together. Uh, and I did get lucky where, after my year with Sean at AU and I started at West Point, I had like one more month left on my contract. And I knew at that point, and I was like, hey, if I want to do this again, I won't be able to effectively be a strength coach or work in college athletics, in my view, because I was like, they're very competing demands, right? Or especially as I aspire to always like be better and move up. Like I want to be the strength coach that travels and does more and helps like with design, like practice load and intensity. And one of the best abilities, like we say for student athletes, is availability, right? So like you got to be the person that's always there. You got to be a person that finds a way to like support in whatever role they need you, whether it's the off season where they're kind of handing you the keys to the car, or it's in season and they're asking you about like, what's the difference between a red and a green day? Like, what's the best day to do this for playing 4 games this week? But if you're not there, those conversations don't happen. So I decided that like it was best. It was great for what it's worth. I loved every moment of it. It helped me realize like get back on track, like improve my GPA greatly, like learn how to like manage, right? Because I kind of skated by in high school a little bit. It taught me how to manage my responsibilities. And then I just took that and applied it this way. And like sometimes when I'm having like a moment, sometimes things don't go away as strength coaches. We don't get everything we want. You get frustrated. It allows you to like have like good perspective and think back of like, it is what it is. Like this happens at like what is perceived like the highest level of government or highest like one of the longest running organizations in the world. So like you're going to be frustrated, and it's just learned me like take the punches.
Yeah, it's definitely like you said, it's a tough balance when you're trying to manage both and try to excel at both. I don't think either of us have probably got into those not wanting to just kind of skate by and like be mediocre at it. But at the same as we talked about, like when it comes to coaching, you can't just continually take out of one and like overfill a bucket. Like at some point, there's going to be a give and take. You're going to have to sacrifice something. Like you have to do it on some weekends. A lot of people aren't going to see all the stuff that you have to do behind the scenes, but like the things that you do with that, like that group suffering, like all the kind of schools that you got to go to, all those things like that set you up to be like in the position you are and be able to impact the athletes and the coaches you are. Like it's interesting to talk to you about that because it prepped you for it. And I've had other guys on the show the same way. Like Kendrick Pratt has done the same thing when he was at West Point and now at Jackson State. Like he did his military experience in the beginning, and then like it's impacted him up to this point. And like I'm doing mine the opposite way around. Like so I have like that coaching ability to kind of rely upon and then learn more of the military side. So it's interesting, but like there's so much to draw from it. But like you said, like the efficiency and being able to realize that like you can't be able to do everything. Keeping it simple is the most important thing. And you have to realize that there's a balance and there's a give and take with all these things. And that stuff is the same as true in the military as it is in the college world, as it is outside of like athletics. So no, that's awesome to hear. And like that's perfect timing that worked out well. I think you have me beat for having a worse situation at American, because I used to tell Sean I would commute from Baltimore, and I'd have to go through the city, get on 95, which is its own shit show, and then get to DC, and I would sleep in my truck until the meters turned on at 6 a.m. I was setting an alarm on my phone, and then I could put quarters in because you had to wait for the lights to turn on. And as soon as those turned on, I could put my quarters in. And at lunch, I'd have to go back out and put more money in and then come back in for the second part of the day. And when I could bounce out early, because the team council or something, he's like, get on the road before you get stuck in hours of traffic. So I think you got me beat with those flights in 10 hours. I'm not driving 10 hours to Massachusetts.
Yeah, kind of what's funny about it, I don't think I ever told Sean that because in my head I'm like, I don't want him to like feel sympathy for me. So like, you know what I mean? Like when you're a young coach, you're like, everyone's judging me. Like, you never know what it like a test, like you're working for that next position, that first full-time position. So sometimes I'd just eat it. And then one day I remember he found out and he was like, dude, why are you doing that? And I was like, oh.
But if you're on the receiving end of that, like I don't know if you've had the opportunity to like hire people or worked with interns that like kind of fall under your like tutelage and like leadership. You want to know those things, but you appreciate those coaches so much more. It's a very saturated profession, and it's got its ups and downs that we've seen, and like it's changed since like I got into it. I'm sure it's changed since you got in it as well. But like those coaches, there's only a couple full-time positions at JMU. There's only a couple full-time positions at UNF. Like there's only we're only going to take a certain amount of interns on. We're only going to take a certain amount of volunteers, if at all, at some of these places. Like if someone wants it that bad that they're willing to drive 10 hours, if they're willing to go from another university, come over and sleep in their truck until they have to wake up, like that's the type of person I want. Like even if you don't have the same degree, you don't have the same experience, like you don't have Power Five experience, and you're coming to a lesser school, like trying to get a full-time job, like you want it more. Like you're more passionate and dedicated than a lot of the other people. And that goes a long way because those coaches want to fight for you more and they want to help you out even more. And the interns that are coming up nowadays, not to get on a huge tangent, like handouts. It's all about handouts, and I don't play that shit.
Yeah, it gets hard. Like I think like, I got a chance, like, and I've always kind of followed what he puts out, Tim Karen after, and I agree with him. He's like, I always worked. And he's like, when an intern, he told me one time, he was like, you just gotta remember no matter what level you are, there's always someone, and it probably applies to like sport coaching too. Like if you quit tomorrow and walked away from it, they could probably fill your position with someone either as talented that hasn't had the opportunity or someone more talented for half the cost, right? Like we're in a saturated field. Like what I do here, someone would be willing to come in for half the price if they would find someone to take it and grow and build. So I was like, you just got to be committed and you got to build value, whether and find where you to build value. And like with Sean, I knew in my role where I was like just running track and field and helping him with his teams, like I thought the best way I could build value is like being available, being present, being willing to learn, like working with the coach. I think he became a head coach relatively fast, right? And they found great success, right? Like he had like a great relationship with his field hockey coach, his women's hoops, his men's soccer coach. And I was like, man, the best thing I can do is be around this, right? Getting the opportunity to like when he'd go in the meeting, he would tell me like what's going on, why they're changing, what the plan is, like give and take. And I was like, as someone who like a younger coach, you don't get around that. And I got an opportunity to get ahead from him and Tim where like I didn't necessarily make those exact mistakes for myself because like I got mentored on like how to handle those situations when they arose. Now I've probably done some dumb shit in my day and said some stuff where I shouldn't, right? Like every coach, because I was still young, but they helped me always like I always think back when I was younger to those lessons when I'd be in that moment and like, the light bulb goes off and you're meeting with the coach and they're like, I only want to lift 2 days a week. And you're like, well, we should lift 3. And it's like, you realize you just want to lift 3 because that's your role in the team as a strength coach, right? They ask you to handle the weight room. You want to be more available. You want to do more. But then you think, you're like, all right, well, it's women's lacrosse. They're going into their preseason. The stress is already high. Like, she's willing to let me lift them pretty hard 2 days a week and train these qualities. Like, we could probably get pretty good at this, right? They're a lower training age. And you realize, like, you're probably wrong, but you're biased to your perspective because your role is strength and conditioning.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, a lot of time, especially when you're young in your career too, like you want to show your value a lot and you want to show how smart you are and how much you know. I mean, it's the same thing that happens, like we talked about, when you're interns and you're bouncing around from different programs because you're so excited about something and you found just the new latest greatest like way to train the team. And you, if you just get the chance to prove them right, like you can show them, but it doesn't always fit into what the prerogative like of the coaches or what they want to see, or the time they're willing to invest in the weight room, or what they see as a transfer. Because those, a lot of times coaches, like strength coaches, forget that sport coaches had a strength coach at some point in time, or maybe didn't. So they have their own biases that they see, or how they view your position, or how they've seen other coaches in those roles in the past, what they do like, what they don't like, how they want their team to look. And sometimes those don't always match up perfectly. Like you're not going to always have the same road to get there. It's our job to like be knowledgeable, understand, be supportive with them, and try to bridge the gap between the two. So what they have as a goal, or if they have a negative connotation of what strength conditioning looks like or what we can offer, not necessarily like completely try to change their mind, but show them that there's other ways that we can benefit them. And if it kind of goes against what they've had in the past, like it's your job to make sure that there's a way to kind of ease that transition and get the best of both worlds. There's still stuff that we can add in, they want stuff that we want to add in that's pertinent, and also you can still add some stuff in that the athletes enjoy too. I forget who said it, but it's like it's a third of, he's like, I program a third of each. What the coaches want to see, a third of what they need to get, and a third of what the athletes enjoy, because that's the best way. If the coach comes in, they see they're doing the stuff that he wants, they're bought in. The athlete comes in, they get stuff that they want to do, they're bought in. I get the stuff that I know that they need to do that prepares them for the field, I'm bought in. Like now everybody's on the same page, and the best program you could do is one that they're going to do.
Yeah, like that's the way, like that's how I think when I look at things, like how do I like define if I'm like successful, is like, am I occurring, like getting more responsibility? Are they coming to you like when they look at like athlete X and they're like, man, he could be someone, he needs to get bigger, right? And they're trying to look for you in your realm to see what you can provide. Or they're like, hey, like what do you see from him? Like how does he move when you like sprint him and jump him? And it kind of like build these qualities. And that's where like I look at it, right? Are they coming to you for like physical development qualities? It's like I always tell my coaches, like think of me as like someone on your staff, right? And I think that's the best way we can. I like to think of our position as like we're a part of their staff. We're the physical development coach. Like if you're going to me to teach you how to hit or throw, like something went really wrong. Like I should not teach either of those. But if you're coming to me and like you see like, you know, like maybe athlete, like our softball player, like she has like a beautiful like arm action, she throws well, she's graceful, but like velocity's not going up. And they're like, what can we get there? And then that's where like what we test, right? I'll look at those metrics and I'll be like, all right, yeah, we can improve on this. But I like think of me as like a member of your staff. And like you said, a rule of the third, what they want, what you want, and they want. Like if you were a head coach and you didn't believe in small ball, you wouldn't hire a hitting coordinator that likes small ball, right? If you were a head coach and you didn't like believe in, I'm just making things up here, like throwing, like you believed in like, you know, like a certain style of pitching, you wouldn't hire a coach that's the complete opposite. You build someone into your system. And I think we got to realize, like, as a strength coach, when we want to succeed, we have to operate in like the confines of the system of the teams we work with, right? Like if I had like a soccer program and she's like, I want him to be the most fit. Like I found success. We win national championships when teams can like run on the thing. Like we only have X amount of players out, one sub. Now, you know, like max velocity is important and all these things, but you should build your system back to provide the qualities that they're going to find successful. Because, you know, if like your coach is like the fittest athletes will play, you know, the fittest athletes are best, that's where you're going to find buy-in from your athletes too, right? Because they're hearing the same message. So it's like if you have like, say, men's soccer and you're trying to lift 4 days a week, but the coaches value fitness and sprint times and all this other stuff over lifting, you're probably not going to get great buy-in. You're going to find results. Meanwhile, you might only lift 2 days a week and find results you never thought you'd see.
Yeah, that's a great point. And kind of touching on what we were discussing right before that as well, like just like with Coach Karen and like Coach Foster, like the just like the state of like strength conditioning, like the importance of like those apprentices, like it's an apprenticeship in my opinion, and like having quality mentors. Like how do you go now to seek out like mentors? Do you still talk with those coaches too and like pick your brain? Because I think the most important thing you kind of said was learning from them, like you were able to prepare yourself like for those situations you went in, but at the same time you still made some of those mistakes because you the best teacher is failure. So if you need to learn those yourself, but you're more prepared, you have to still experience it. Like, what do you do now to like still kind of make sure you're ready for the next role, like leading a department or leading a bigger program, or moving on? Like, how do you still kind of make sure that you're prepared for a new challenge, whether it be at JMU or beyond, like in your career?
It's a little different now. Like at West Point, you're surrounded by a lot of coaches. We're all in the same office. But here, like one of the things where like I love the challenge when Christian hired me, he's like, hey, like technically, he's my boss. No questions about it. But he's like, you're going to be working on an island by yourself. So a lot of the day-to-day decisions, like week-to-week decisions, are going to be on you. And he's like, he told me, and it's like, I'll get back to that, but it's like success is defined where like I shouldn't have to meet with your coaches. Like you should be able to handle that in this role as an associate strength coach in your own weight room. Like I shouldn't have to like meet with your coaches daily. They shouldn't be reaching out to me. You should be able to handle it on a day-to-day basis, right? You should be able to handle almost everything that comes up, like your scheduling. I don't have any conflicts. It's only 2 teams. And he gave me responsibility. So like with that, like I look at that and I also see like, am I able to develop relationships with my coaches? Like, do they know me? Like, do they know, like, am I better? Like it's hard because I'm thinking more from, I'm reaching a point now, whereas I'm coaching more, I have other people like that I've worked with calling me, confirming like, is this the right thing? Is this the wrong thing? And then I end up talking to them about the same thing where I'm not sure like when I'll take that next step to be the director. I don't know if I aspire to be a director of a strength and conditioning department. Right now, my end goal is to like stay working in baseball and softball and be like, maybe the director of like a bigger baseball program where I work with one team because I do value like being with, and that's my new site, right? So if you ask me that question a couple of years ago, I'd tell you I want to be an athletic director. Like I want to work my way up the chain. I want to be the assistant AD for strength and conditioning. I want to be in charge of department. But getting the chance to work with teams here, falling in love with the process of like how baseball and softball operate. Like I found myself wanting to work at like strictly baseball or softball, be more one team oriented. And it's kind of taken a different path where I know a lot of us strength and conditioning see like the mecca is being like director of strength and conditioning or like head strength and conditioning coach. And that was definitely my site. So it's like, I can't really answer your question because it's changing all the time where more I'm surrounded by like the guys on the baseball team, the softball girls here, like their coaches, the staff, the support staff. I realize like this is the area I think I'll succeed the most. And I find the most like value and enjoy, right? Being around these style teams where like strength and conditioning matters a little more because it's a power-based sport. Like especially where how it's going at like higher level softball, higher level baseball, where it's like the minor leagues are pumping money into what they do now, right? So like there's just so much to know and explore that like I don't see myself when I'm 42 getting enough of it. Where I was starting to see myself as if I became a head strength coach somewhere at a higher level, like eventually you're going to be like, all right, what's the next challenge?
Right. Yeah, I think I was kind of probably the same way at some point. Like if I ever got asked a question like, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? Like everybody says like to be a director, but as soon as you start like surrounding yourself around those people more and more, you kind of see more of the administrative stuff and like the headaches that you kind of have to go through. And while it is a different challenge, it's a different kind of beast that you go through. Like you start realizing that a lot of that time that you have to end up spending and allocating towards those things is more time away from like the touch points of working with the athletes, like being able to go to practices and stuff like that. Again, it falls back on like just the time that you have allotted. Like if you're going to take out of one bucket, like you have and give it somewhere else. Like you don't get it back. You can't just keep adding. You're going to fail at some point and be completely worked out. So like I think that's a great point. Like if you want to be surrounded by a team, you want to be part of an organization and stuff, and be in one team kind of track focused, like that's the way to do it. And baseball and softball are definitely trending in that direction. So with that kind of in your role right now, like when it comes to being outside of the weight room and then like kind of stepping onto the diamond with both those teams, like where does your responsibility and role kind of come in? Like what are you ending up doing at practice? Because a lot of people might be just stuck in the weight room. Like West Point is very different. Like you can't be everywhere at the same time. Everybody's practicing at the same time. Everybody's lifting at the same time. That's what it is. And then when you're at American, it's hard pressed that you're even able to see them practice because it's on the hour every single hour. So now that you have some freedom and you're invested and you're with those teams solely, where does your kind of duty rely on game day and like practice as well?
Yeah. So like, I guess the easiest way, and I'll pick baseball for this scenario, just because before we are speaking, I was kind of writing out like their in season, their preseason plan, like trying to plan out, like map out the stressors. So it's fresh in my brain. But I guess like the easiest way to think of like that process would come from like when you come back on August 27th, right? Like we said, is like, and I know it's a little off, but if you think I'll meet with the coaches, I'll be like, what do we want? Who, what, when, where, why? Like, what's the goal? Usually by midsummer, so we start to plan them out because they are playing summer ball, so it's a little different, right? They're still playing 40 games over the summer. So how I train, it's a very extended in season, right? When they come back in the fall and we'll start going over stress load management, I'm like, all right, what times do you want to practice? We should lift X days, like build our red days and green days. So we kind of consolidate stress, like harder practices, we'll lift on those days, easier practices, we'll keep lower time management. So I meet with our hitting coach and our pitching coach. And with the pitching coach, I'll meet with him and we'll come back to that. When I meet with the hitting coach, fielding coach, and Ike, and we go over, I was like, these are the best days to lift on. We're going every other day, 2 days a week or 3 days a week. This is what we're trying to train. And what I'll do is like my role is, I think, a little more stress management, where I'll be like, hey, you should expect them the next day to struggle with this. Like, so if you're going to do base running, if you're going to do like technique or technical aspect or like run throughs or walk throughs and nothing high speed, this would be the best day to do it because we're doing these movements and this is why we're doing it. And I was like, but if you want to do base running, I'd recommend you do it before we lift this day because you'll get a worse quality product the next day. Like vice versa. I was like, all right, if we're hitting, like maybe we should lift in the morning this day so they have 6 hours of rest before they come hit. And I'll just make suggestions, like, because at the end of the day, like our man Ike is the captain of the ship. And I was like, I'll tell him like from my experience, what I've seen, what's best. And then he's going to take his experiences too and build on that. So like we'll meet who, what, when, where, why. I'll tell them the purpose of the block, like what we're trying to do for these 4 weeks. And then for the weight room, like pretty much it's all hands off. Like whatever we'll go with changes is fine. The coaches are all on board with it. They tell me what they want. We program that way. My role at practice is a little different, where sometimes I'll help with like return to play after they come back from like their stage one. So say if we have a hamstring and I get to be out there for both teams, I'll help like rehab that, right? So if you're working back, Nick, from like a hamstring injury, you're past the acute phase with our athletic trainer and it's return to sprint, return to performance. Like we'll meet, we'll build a plan, and during practice, we'll try to make sure that you're getting your work out there, whether we're like starting our sprint progression, plyo progression, we'll do it there so you're available so they can also learn in between. So if they're doing hitting drills and you can't hit that day, or base running, he can listen to what they're teaching and we'll be right in the area behind him so he can listen and still get like reps. And we'll try to integrate as much as we can into the practice, right? So say if he's only at 50% because it's pretty serious, I'll help monitor it, where like John's watching the practice, I'll go over there and I'll be like, all right, hey, you got this rep here, this rep here, as we get later and later. My biggest role at practice every day tends to be, I will run our warm up, but our warm up's designed a little differently, where we do our functional range conditioning daily. So we hit our daily mobility that we decided is the most important. And generally we work on our like, we go lumbar, spine, hips, shoulder cars. We hit our cars every day, right? So we do cars. Then from there, we go into our dynamic prep. And based on the goal of the day, we try to touch max velocity twice a week after we do our plyos. We do acceleration based twice a week. And then we do, we'll do that kind of like decel twice a week. So we hit those two qualities twice a week and we just stack it based off days we lift and days they have scrimmage. And then we'll go back to the pitchers, right? So the way the pitchers work is a little differently. I'll get the throwing schedule from Travis. He'll give me the throwing schedule, and he'll usually ask, "Is like, hey, what's the best way to build this back so that they're ready for their pen day and their live day?" And we'll build back from there. So, like generally speaking, after they do their live day, we come in and we do our functional range conditioning. We hammer that, right? We go through a circuit to get blood flowing. Before we do 2 to 3 rounds, and we pick movements that kind of redrive these, like where they're moving through a range of motion, like a split squat for internal rotation, a single arm press, a single arm push where they're getting like deep shoulder flexion, or all these movements, and we combine it. And then from there, we go into our like isometric work where we'll do like pails and rails, contraction, relaxation, and try to restore normative range to what they have. Then they leave. Then, so if they were throwing on Friday, they'll do that Saturday, Sunday. They come in. It's generally one of our heavier lifts. So they'll lift Saturday, Sunday, total body. Monday's off. Tuesday, they're throwing their pen. After they throw their pen on Tuesday or Wednesday, they come in on Wednesday and they do like a lighter lift, a variation where we're training the quality we think they need the most, whether that's like accelerative strength, like strength power, power output. That's based off the testing we do. So every week we'll test broad jump, 20-yard dash, and then we test on our force plates also. Most of the lifts, once you get past our entry phase, we do use velocity-based training this year. So like, like if you came into me, you weigh 200 pounds and you can safety bar squat 400, to me, you're strong enough. You've checked our boxes. And now our goal is not to get you stronger, but we gear that last lift of the training to like what we think you need based off our testing. Like, do you need more power output? Do you need more force output? And we'll gear it back that way.
That last day, that's awesome to kind of hear everything. But that last day you were talking about, like that for everybody, that's kind of geared towards what you need to do. This is all off season primarily.
Yeah, that's off season, and we find success, and we'll mirror somewhat as much as we can in season, right? Because I really know in the off season, like the pitchers in fall ball will throw in a set rotation, but when you go live, like when you go into season and you're playing 4 games a week, you have 4 starters. They're really the easiest ones to program for, right? Because we know the stressor, we know the pen. Generally, they'll follow the same schedule. Our relievers, it's a little hit or miss, right? So we'll go and like say if you end up coming in Friday throwing 50 pitches and you close out the game, starter goes 6, you throw 60 pitches in 3 more innings, and I know you're dead for the rest of the weekend. We'll be able to mirror that because maybe you'll go Tuesday, and then we know Tuesday, if you're like coming in relief, it's more of like a pen day again, right? And then we'll build back. But we generally try to plan 2 days a week for our relievers. And if we get to a situation where say, man, you're coming in and crushing it, I'm gonna talk to Coach T and like, then it may change and you get 3 days that week. So it's pretty fluid. We try to keep them on the same because we do know like more we study and look, like loss of thoracic flexion extension drives more like stress on the shoulder, which pushes down to the elbow when you lose like range of motion in your glenohumeral head, like your shoulder socket. And it's just like it just trickles down the whole way. But we try to do the best I can. It's hard to explain because I just try to be fluid with it.
I like it though. No, you're reverse engineering everything and having those conversations with the coaches, and that's the best way to make sure you're on the same page. I think it's huge, like what you talked about. Like obviously a lot of people have like those beginning of the year meetings and the end of the year meetings, like just either kind of built in or like just trying to get on the same page with the coaches, but giving the feedback of like, hey, this is all right, well, this is what do you want to do, like asking them how they want to structure practice and everything, and then you kind of suggesting, hey, well, this is what I think we need to do to train the qualities that'll get you to that point, and it fits within your practice plan, but this is what I'm going to do on my end, and this is what you should expect the next day. Because oftentimes like you don't communicate that part of it to the coaches, because even if they are a hands-off type of like sport coach, they're like, okay, well, you have them for the weight room, but then they come in the next day and they're completely dead, or they look like they haven't done anything. Like coaches start kind of questioning what you're doing, and then they're like, well, this suffers, and this tips over into the next day affecting my practice. But if you're preemptively telling them like, hey, this is going to be our red day, this is when we're going to really push everything on this day, this is our high velocity day, whatever it is, like coaches understand and can make adjustments to those practice plan. Maybe it needs to be more of an extended warm up. Maybe we need to push back. Maybe we shouldn't do extra hitting on the front end of practice. Maybe we should cap it at this point in time and not play a full 9 innings, like for a scrimmage, like whatever it is. Like at least you guys are kind of going back and forth with those things so that you can get the best of both worlds and train both qualities simultaneously, because it's still one athlete that has to handle all that stress.
It's like that. Like an example I can use with like softball here is an easy one. Before we planned out their off-season block when they got out of fall ball, me, Lauren, hitting coach Jen all met together and I was like, all right, so like what days do you plan to go live? Like what's your defensive days like? And then I went over as like, so the way I wrote this, like this is the highest stress day. I can move this around whenever we need. Like they do have a younger team, a lot of freshmen, sophomore they're going to play. As they build up, they get returners coming back. And I was like, so what days do you need them to like evaluate or like make sure that the pitchers are ready to hit live or like the hitters are ready to perform, like, and we'll build back from there. So she's like, all right, we're going to go live on Wednesday this week. And I was like, all right, let's just, I'll program their heaviest lift for post Wednesday. Cause we know Thursday's easier after going like live and scrimmaging or whatever it is. And then I'll tell her, I was like, hey, if you're doing anything Thursday, just know like they might look slow. Right. Because like I'm going to push them pretty hard after you push them hard. So Thursday might be slower. So like if you look at that, you might want trying to train speed quality or like if you're looking for like the reaction time, it might be down. And then Friday we'll do this. And she's like, okay. And she's like, well, they can lift earlier Friday because we're going to come in and I'll know that like I'll keep practice shorter on this end and we'll build it back from there. So like we had set lift days and now we moved around block by block depending on like what day they need.
I like it. Hey, so kind of touching on what you've done too, like we talked about like your experience, like weightlifting and everything. How why is it still important for you to kind of still stay involved? Like obviously you said like being active is just part of what you've done. Like obviously like being in the army, you're gonna have to do physical training like whenever is possible. You're gonna have to do your PT test. Like weightlifting is enjoyable usually when Sean is not telling your technique sucks or Jake is throwing up triple whatever you're trying to do for a squat. But why do you continue to like compete and train? And like, does any of that, those weightlifting qualities that like you're very familiar with end up kind of transferring a little bit to what you're doing with your sports? Because usually baseball and softball notoriously are not big on the Olympic side for, I would say, the majority of coaches.
Yeah. So for me, like sometimes I question why I still do it because like, I'm in the middle of my training session. I'm like, I hate this shit, right? Like, I'm like, what am I doing? I was like, I'm 90 minutes in, I'm dying, and I was just like, why am I doing this? Because like we said, it's a personal thing. I like the aspect of competing, going on the stage and doing everything about it, but I don't know if it brings like too much value in terms of like your coaches value you more because you compete in weightlifting, right? They're probably like they probably think we're a little crazy, right? They're like, you want to pick a sport where like you're trying to move max weight and you're pretty much picking the bar up off the ground and jumping under it or diving under it, hoping it doesn't crash on you. I think it's more of just like a personal thing for me, but I guess it helps in essence of when I think like bigger picture, where having a coach being responsible to someone still, right? Where I got to trust Prudence, even though, like we said, we're very knowledgeable about what we do, but I'm not a weightlifting coach. All right, like Prudence has competed on the biggest stage, Jake. He's done everything, and like generally speaking, like he gets me well every time, right? Even if I have a complaint, usually he'll just tell me to eat it, and it works out, right? Because like he's knowledgeable, so like trusting the process is a bigger one. Well, I'll fire back with that all the time, and like even if I complain, which I won't lie, I do complain to him and he'll hear this and agree. I'll be like, why are we doing this? What are we doing that? And understanding like sometimes like he coaches me remotely. So like that part where like I ask all these questions, I realize I can get further ahead by just answering the questions before they ask. So it's like if it's the first day of a block and we're going over a new sheet, like say if we have like 4 to 5 things to do total, right? We program very light. We don't do a lot of exercises. I know it's worth cutting the last accessory to explain why, even though all my athletes might not want to hear it. I've explained it and they understand the purpose of it because a lot of times I think we kind of rush and just do it to do it. And some don't want to hear it, but maybe like 10 that do, and out of the 10 that do, like they start to explain it to the other teammates when they're complaining about why we're doing this, right? So it kind of gets in the front end to complete buy-in, but also it helps me understand keep the goal because the end goal, if you want to compete in weightlifting, whether it's recreational or you're someone like Prudence who can lift the house and compete on the national stage and international stages, the end goal is snatching more and clean and jerking more, right? Just like reminds me of sometimes like when you want to do so much in the weight room, their end goal is to play baseball, play softball. It's not to be like a weightlifter or a power lifter or have the best squat, right? That's like now maybe some want to push it, but their goal is to like play 56 games. Their goal is to be the best on the team. Their goal is to win a spot. Their goal is to contribute, not necessarily like sell out to squat 2 times body weight. which is like, and some of the best weightlifters are in the same boat, right? Like they'll clean, like I think Prudence was telling me he could at one point he could clean 365 and he was only front squatting 400. I could have made those numbers up, but like that ratio is what I mean.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's valuable advice for anybody too. Like whether you're a weightlifter, you're competing yourself, or you're a coach, like keeping the main goal the main goal. That's huge. I mean, to have mentors and have like the programming, even as a coach, to be taken off your plate is huge. I've got to that point in time where like I liked programming for myself, and I've talked to so many people about it, like, but the biases you put in yourself for your own program, or how you can kind of cross stuff off and be like, oh, well, this is better, and second guess yourself. You'll never create the perfect program. It's so much easier to just outsource that and have someone tell me what to do. Even the other day, like jacked up my knee. I'm talking to one of my buddies who's a physical therapist, and he's like, do this. And I was like, oh yeah, that why didn't I just think of that before? It's so much easier to have someone, even if like is on par with how you think or has the similar experience, like they're knowledgeable and they're an outside perspective. They're treating you like the client, the athlete. So you're invested a little bit more when that happens too. So, but to have like those knowledgeable people to rely upon and have conversations with and be your programming expert, that's awesome. So now good luck to you the rest of the time on the big stage. Hopefully you and Jake get to compete with each other at some point in time.
Yeah, I kind of want to eventually, hopefully, make like one of the bigger meets so he can coach me in person. He doesn't fly out for the local meets, but he's like, if you make a big meet, I'll come. And I'm like, all right, that's a goal now. Like, I want to do it before I'm a master's athlete because I've learned like what it takes to qualify drops significantly. So it's a win. But if I can stay healthy, then, but it's a fun sport. It's fun training for something, like prioritizing and building your day around it. Uh, I don't know how it's like, and it's addicting. Like, like you find something that's like a niche and you're addicted to, and that's it. It's kind of like, why do we become strength coaches?
Yeah, it's a perfect kind of filler in too. And like you said, I'd rather have my schedule kind of jam packed with things and be able to organize it. And I want to train. I'd rather train for a purpose. I don't do well when I don't have like a competition or something in mind. Like I have to have something, otherwise I'm just doing it to do it. And I know myself, like just being super OCD about everything. If I don't have something in mind, I'm going to sit there and probably do nothing because there's so much like programming, different exercise. Well, if I do this, I can't do this. Like I overthink it to the point where just going to do something. So if I have a goal and I'm training for something, I'm set. I'm set. You could give me 4 years worth of a program. And if at the end of 4 years, something happens, I'll stick to that versus anything else.
Oh, I agree. It's sometimes like I'll see what like Jake programs and I'm like, I ain't doing that shit. And then I'm like, well, sheet says, like, let's go in the moment. Like, you know what I mean? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm tired, I'm sore, I'm not feeling it. And then you'll look and you'll have like 4 sets of 3 with a 5-second pause. That's some outrageous number. And you're like, I'm not doing that. I won't hit that today. And then I'm like, no, sheet says, might as well. Like,
You got to do it. You got
it's
to
just
do it.
it's like that it's like they say it's like sometimes the best thing is like the simplicity because it's consistent. I don't have to think about it. I have it there. I show up like whether I'm tired, sick, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do it. I think that's the best part. It's kind of like what like I think I'd say probably some college athletes love about they miss when they get out of collegiate strength and conditioning world is like they now have to think about it. They have to go somewhere. It's not convenient anymore. And like you know what I mean. But like hiring a coach and competing like when Putin's is in charge of everything, right? Like he writes the program, he tells me what to do, how to do it, he coaches me. It's just something like an environment like this where we're constantly like interacting with others, programming for others, right? Like I don't have to think about that. I mean, like I have to spend hours thinking about where our baseball guys are strong enough that I was like, all right, I do need to change what we do for some of them. Like I need like we said like an entry level program or an alpha program where like it's the basics like are we getting strong in stable positions, do a full range of motion, right? Like are we like squatting X numbers that we believe, and then it's like all right, like well like now player X is our catcher can like front squat close to 400 pounds. I was like, do we need to push that strength anymore when he only weighs like he's squatting 2 times body weight on a front squat? I was like, is the risk reward there, right? I was like, all right, so we need a next level. So then I pushed him and now he's like split squatting, reverse lunging like 360, 350 for like doubles. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, all right, well, we filled that bucket. And it's like now we're going to start to him concurrent qualities where it's like max velocity acceleration day, but his strength movement might be single leg squat from bench because that's like the lowest hanging fruit now. Where we're training like force unilaterally, like so like split squats asymmetrical, and we're training like our power output bilaterally. So it's like I like thinking about that stuff, and not thinking about my program and writing my own allows me not to do that.
Yeah, definitely. One thing off your plate so you can focus on like what your priority job is. That's the best thing to do for sure. And yeah, I think you're right too. Like when college athletes leave, like obviously I've told athletes like at the end of 4 years, I'd expect you to be able to write a program because you basically took a like quote unquote like strength conditioning class for 4 years. Like you're a Division 1 athlete. You've been in the weight room for so long, you've been on the field, you've been playing, like you should know like how to put together a rudimentary program. But at the same time, like you're not going to have your team, you're not going to have the same goal in mind. Like they like that feeling of, hey, come in, whatever's on the schedule, whether I know it or not, I'm doing it with my teammates. It's that shared suffering again. And like I'm going to do that program because it gets me to there. It's a hard change of pace when you get out of it. So finding a new coach, finding a new purpose, something like that when you get out of college, that's huge. But that's a topic for another day. So hey, where do you kind of go nowadays too for kind of like developing like your program for resources or anything like that to kind of make sure that you're building yourself up? Like there's certifications, there's courses, there's endless amount of things like online. Is there like a resource or a coach or person that like is either interesting you right now or someone that you've always kind of followed for information?
That works because I got a list on my phone of like, so what I'll do is like, they have a great thing here at JMU where they'll pay for continuing education. They'll reimburse the budget. I think you can get like one or two a year. And Christian always encourages me to do that. So I'll take one at a time. When they reimburse it, I'll get another one. Honestly, besides like talking to people, I think the best is like I'm reaching a point too where it's branching out into strength and conditioning and kind of rabbit holing on things where like there's the big ones you can always follow, whether it's like Zach Dakin in baseball, some of the other baseball performance coaches, Mike Boyle, talking to people, like Foster, where it's like when we bounce back and forth and I'm like, dude, like these guys are so strong. He's like, yeah, now it's time to train qualities. He's like, that you did the easy part of your job. He's like, once you get them strong through like these movements, like that's easy. Now it's like force application, like horizontal force application, right? And getting better. So like whether it's like Les Spellman, I'm spending more time probably on sprinting, jumping. And now that I'm here with baseball and softball, and I've realized like these are the sports I want to work with the rest of my time. Like I don't want to be a director. I want to be the guy that's like the short list for an MLB job one day. Like who knows? You know what I mean? Like I want to be in this setting. It switched to now like kind of like the more like drive line, more reading Cressy stuff again. Like I've always followed his, but getting more in depth into it right now, watching like kind of more the fringe, like understanding like how certain coaches do X and Y, like understanding hitting better, understanding pitching better mechanics, and not from an aspect of I want to teach it, but if I can understand their language, their movement, and why they do what, it'll help me program better. So like my short list of courses, and not a short list at all, is on base U pitching, on base U hitting, Paula Quinn PICP 1 and 2, Mike Reynolds arm care CEUs like Les Spellman's art of acceleration, Altus, and understanding like like it's not bigger, faster, stronger to me anymore. It's leaner, faster, stronger. Right. And so I just try to check boxes. Like last year I did functional range conditioning. I did the second level of that, like between Zach Dakin's courses, and I took like two or three more that I can't remember off the top of my head, but just rabbit holing in the baseball world because realizing like I got into it a little late. I started with hockey when I was down at American University. Like you take the job in front of you when you're a young coach. I wasn't with baseball. I got to work with field hockey, men's hoops, women's hoops, wrestling, different sports. And when I was a GA, they didn't have baseball at Saint Francis University, right? So I was there primarily with women's lacrosse, assisting with football, and assisting with men's and women's soccer. So I'm behind the eight ball, and I love it because it's just pressure, right? Because I have people who are my age, have been coaching as long as me, who have been in baseball since day one, right? So there's nothing better than being backed into a corner. So like now I'm like, all right, I need to learn more. I was like, I need to consistently be like applying pressure to myself. So next year, like my program is going to evolve. Everything will evolve. Like how I program, how I approach, how I link movements together will change.
I like it. No, it's great to have goals in mind and then be able to kind of like set in stone and like have a list of, hey, these are the things that I want to accomplish. And I mean, being backed into a corner and putting your own like internal pressure on yourself and like being demanding, that's the best way to kind of continue to push the envelope and get to the position that you ultimately want to be in, and also get into the position where you feel like you're doing the best for your athletes, like as a coach and practitioner. So that's awesome. Hey, like any good training session, we end the show with the finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe overtime for you. So you can answer them rapid fire, or you could take your time and expand on any of them. But you ready?
Ready as ever be.
All right. First one I got for you: biggest influence in the strength and conditioning profession, and biggest influence in Olympic weightlifting.
All right, so I'd have to say, we'll just go with the two people I talked about. Biggest influence in the strength and conditioning session. I only got to work with him as an intern once. Is Tim Karen. I follow all his stuff. Obviously, give him a shout out. Like, subscribe, share to PH Performance Podcast too. In addition to the strength game, but like he puts out a lot of good stuff that just like dives into rabbit holes. And one thing I love that he does is he links his resources on everything. So if you find something you like, you can rabbit hole for weeks and months on it. In terms, I have to give the biggest like influence for Olympic weightlifting has to be Sean Foster, right? Because I wouldn't have gotten into it if it wasn't for him. Like if he didn't have me go through his like entry level program and he wasn't teaching me every day as I was trying to figure it out. Because I was just like one of those strength coaches that was like pull the bar up and pray and get under it for a while. But then like he got me right. So
Yeah, the pull and pray is the way to do it. Hey, so when you're not coaching, you're not competing, what are some of your hobbies outside the weight room walls?
I think it's the same as everyone, right? I just like hang out. Like one thing I did, and I actually took from another coach is I never did a great job of it before. As obviously like we can say like family, reading, like being around friends, that's a given, right? Like being with your dog, going out, doing activities, but trying to become like a little more invested in the school and the community, like going to the basketball games, going to the football games, being around like everything, right? Just trying to be like involved in where you're at, like being involved in the community. So whether that's like their farmers market, like I can tell you, like it's completely changed at West Point. I might have known like 5 people outside of West Point my whole time there, but between here, like I go to a local gym to train sometimes, and I've got to meet so many people outside of my profession. They're cool. Some are firefighters. Like one, they run the real estate company. It turned out like one of the guys I train and work with, he runs the agency that I lease from. Right, like I've just gotten super involved in the community and tried to build like a network of resources like in the area, because as strength coach, we tend to be a little transient, right? So one thing is like our high school friends, college friends, our family will always be there, but we kind of get like subjugated to Christmas, holidays when we go back home. So trying to build a better network of like friends and family in the community, because like most college towns are very welcoming. And like I can say that about here, like, I train, coach like adult fitness classes at CrossFit Harrisonburg on the side. And I've gotten to meet so many people where like I'll go to the game with them this weekend on college game day. They're like, hey, we got an extra ticket. Do you want to come? And it's just building like my community where I'm at, not just reserving myself for like being back home.
I like it. Hey, so you've had basically 2 careers already, but if you weren't coaching and you didn't take any part in the military route, what do you think you would be doing as a profession right now?
Yeah, I would say like the easiest thing to say would be a gym owner, but that's the same thing, right? So that's a bad answer. Uh, you know, as of today, I think I'd want to be a firefighter, mainly because some people I grew up with, he's a firefighter. When I hear his stories, it seems awesome. I have no other context of what it's like. And our former coach, Mike's a firefighter, and sometimes he'll share some stories, and I'm like, that's fun, right? Like, uh, I think I just picked the same thing, right? Like, it's just a different avenue, but like, being around the people, he tells the stories, and it seems hilarious in the moment because you're around the same guys all day. I think I'd pick firefighter. Not that that changes anything, because it's pretty much just like being back in the situation we are.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, but that's a good one. I don't think anybody's picked that so far. Hey, if you're setting up an ideal training day for yourself and Jake puts something crazy together, what is your go-to music that's playing when you're lifting? And then what is that post-training meal look like after it's all said and done?
All right. Ideal training day. I'd say it'd start, I get to sleep in a little bit. And that's like athletic sleep in. So like maybe 7 a.m. Like get out of bed, probably up at like 5:30, just staring, telling myself I'm gonna go back to sleep. Wake up, get to eat breakfast, and get to sit down to eat it. Because I think a lot of us probably end up with those morning sessions where like we make breakfast and then we just like stand at the counter because we're like, we got to leave in 30 minutes anyways. Like you're doing other stuff, getting ready to get there. So you're like 20, 30 minutes early. Sit down, eat it, drink some coffee, do some like reading beforehand, like whether it's like a strength conditioning book or like right now I'm reading Piatia's book, Outlive, and it's a good book. Like I enjoy everything about it. Drive the facility. Now we're looking at probably like what, 9:30 is like my favorite training time. I never get it, but like I don't know what it is about that time. I think that comes from like AU when I started seriously training. Like that was our training block, like 9:30, 10 to 12. So it's like, like brand loyalty. I'm used to it. Um, the music choice just depends. Like if you follow me on Instagram, you'll notice it's all over the place. It could go from like Ed Sheeran to 1990s grunge music. Sometimes it could be like rap or EDM. Like, I don't know. Like it's just a in the moment spur of the mood thing, right? Sometimes like for a while, it's like MJ, it's Michael Jackson when I was snatching, and then I'd switch to like hardcore death metal when I'd have to go to clean and jerk.
Mixing it up. What about when it's all said and done? What's the meal look like?
Yeah. So right now, I'm pretty obsessed for some reason since I moved down here. There's a Qdoba like 5 minutes from my house. It's not the best, but I get like the double chicken, double rice bowl, like chips and everything. And I don't know what it is because I've gone to other Qdobas and it's not the same. But this is my Qdoba, is what I say. There's something about it. Like when I walk in, I'm mildly embarrassed, right? And like they ask me, do you want the same thing? And I'm like, damn it. Like they know my order before I walk in, and I'm like, it's bad. I got to start switching it up.
No, that's your local spot. They got your booth is ready to go. They got your order. Eventually they'll get the time down, so that'll be perfect.
Oh yeah, dude, the worst part. So what happened is last year I actually broke my hand at work, right? And that's where like it came. So I couldn't really cook. I didn't think of it like too bad in the moment. Like you kind of see here, like they put a plate in it. I was like demoing how to do a box jump wrong. And as I jumped up, I smacked my hand off the box and I heard like and I was like, everyone's watching. So obviously I played it off and I was like, damn, that hurt. Right. Like, and I was like, I can kind of move my hand. I think we're good. And then like my middle finger started going numb. So I'm helping like cover and coach this session. And then I go to the AT. Turns out it's broken. And I never like thought long term. I get a surgery like 2 days later. I had like my meal prep done for the week. I get surgery. Now it's Monday. And this is how I got on the Qdoba train, right? Like I go to cook and not thinking about it, I try to go pick up the pan with my left hand because it's like in a cast and it just drops. Like I can't move it. I can't hold anything. Trying to like crack, like make like cook rice and everything. Trying to do it with one hand was the hardest thing. So eventually I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to like I signed up for a meal prep thing and then I was like twice a week I'll get Qdoba. And you know what they say is like you don't mean to develop habits, but I just did. And it's stuck ever since. Where now I still go once a week. And like we said, man, it's so embarrassing. I walk in and like they know. And sometimes like the people will be like, yeah, he's gonna get double chicken, rice. Make sure you give him chips, give him a little extra chips. He's always here. We'll give you the discount. Like, and I'm like, oh no.
Hey, it pays. It pays. There's your brand loyalty right there. That's perfect. Hey, so last one I got for you. In your opinion, what is the most important attribute of a successful athlete, and then also of a successful coach, if they're not the same?
So I think like, I used to tell you like everyone will tell you speed kills the fastest, but I think it's about like coachability. Like, are you willing to buy into the system that you're recruited into, right? Like, are you willing to buy into the process? Like, are we trying to get faster? Like, you get to believe that what we're doing is going to make you faster. Like, you get to buy into like what we do in the weight room, like how the coaches are going to coach you. Because like in the college sector, like we're recruiting you for a system, for a purpose, like we're training for a reason. It's not very general, right? And I think that's always the hard where private sectors, like they do a great job. And I think sometimes, but it's very general because they don't know like where you're going to go play at the next level. They don't know what type of system you're going to walk into. They don't know like the demands of the coach. So like you get to take your prior experiences and build off it. And then just how you bought in to say like, if they trained with you at UNF and transferred here, they got to take that same approach and buy into why we're doing what we're doing here. And generally speaking, like the athletes that I see go all in the process and the approach and what we do, like succeed the most, right? Like they get more opportunities. They become faster if we're trying to get faster. They become a better hitter. Like they learn how to pick whatever they want, whatever qualities the coaches are pushing, they tend to succeed at. And like, you know what I mean? Like it just builds upon itself.
Awesome. No, that's great. And I couldn't agree more too. Like that's something that every athlete should be able to possess. And if you're able to do that, you definitely are going to be successful, not only in athletics, but and beyond. So that's awesome. Hey, for anybody that's got any follow-up questions for you, Matt, like where can they follow along, kind of see your training, see the next time that you're going to be on the stage competing, and then get ready for your guys' spring competitive season?
So Sunbelt is all on ESPN. I think we're on ESPN Plus all year. So when they play like JMU baseball and softball, for me, I would say I'm looking it up right now because I, for some reason, can't remember my Instagram name. It's Coach_Matt_Ryan. I would say message me or follow me on there because as you know, if you email me, there's a chance I don't see it. And I go back and flag them so I can get back to it. But I'm not the best about my email when it's outside of like my coaches and administrators emailing me. So I'd say the best way to reach me is on Instagram. I'm pretty active there and I'll usually answer pretty fast.
Yeah, no worries. It's I got mine to try to push all the vendor emails just away and out of my inbox because it gets flooded. So no, it's I appreciate you coming on today. Like it feels like long lost. It should have happened a long time ago, especially kind of retracing our roots to kind of see where we've kind of come up and see some of the mentors and places we've crossed paths. So I appreciate you coming on today, and good luck with the rest of your fall leading into this spring competitive season, Coach.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.